Hi, I'm Lois Powell.
And I'm Susan Schuler, and we're here to share tips, tricks, ideas, and resources
To help you discover what's your story.
Hey Lois, welcome back everybody to episode 3 of our podcast, What's Your Story? Today we're going to talk about vital records. Vital records are essential.
And Susan, essential records are vital.
They are indeed. So what is a vital record? Vital with a capital V. It's a government-issued document containing important information about a person's life events like birth, marriage, or death. And this is not just a federal record. It could be issued by your town. It could be issued by your city. It could be issued by your county. So those are the big main vital records: birth, marriage, death. But there are others, aren't there?
There are many other kinds of records around. We talked about various counties, etc., but there are also things like draft registrations, especially like World War I and World War II. You can find in those records birth, dates, ages, citizenship, lots of information. There are passenger lists where you can also find birth dates. Those are vital records that people don't necessarily think about to get that basic information from. But those records will also give you a lot of other information as well. But where should you first start?
I think, and I bet you agree, the place to start, like the holy grail of records, are the census. You know, the federal census, or if your state has issued a census. Census asks a lot of great questions that give a lot of great clues. And every year they ask different questions. Sometimes you could find out naturalization dates, or dates that people immigrated. Occupation is another great clue from the census. Another great clue from the census is home ownership. Did they own their house or rent their house? They owned their house, odds are they paid taxes, and then you could go to tax records. What's another great clue? Another great clue would be, were they farmers? Because then maybe you could look for an agricultural census.
And censuses are a great place. If you have some information already about them, so it's easy to find them, even if it's just location, census is a great place to start. You know, Susan, there's a list out called U.S. Vital Records.
Yes.
And it'll tell you what years each state started recording vital records. Now, this is on a state basis. And it's pretty funny, I think. I find it very interesting.
I think it's fascinating.
For example, I think birth records are interesting because the earliest birth records captured by a state were in Massachusetts, started in 1841. Well, that seems to make sense. Massachusetts is one of our very early settling places.
Yes, but I think Massachusetts, people were being born in Massachusetts in the 1700s. They weren't keeping the records until the 1841.
And that's exactly right. So although we're saying vital records and censuses, you'll be looking for information in a number of places. The funny thing with birth records is Vermont didn't even start collecting statewide until 1955.
Oh my God. So you didn't have to issue a birth certificate in Vermont until 1955.
Until 1955.
Wow. So this is a great document for people to own.
It's a great document to find out where your state started and ended for birth, marriage, and death. And they may be different dates within that year.
Right.
So we can publish such a document.
We can put it in the show notes. If you look in the description underneath our podcast, or we could put a link to this record. This resource was created by the CDC. And I know they've been very busy this year, but this part of their website has been maintained, and it lists your state. You click on, it's a big map. You click on your state, and it'll tell you when they started collecting birth records, marriage records, death records, any gaps in that. Like, let's say, all the records were destroyed because of the Civil War or something to that effect. And it's a really good way to be strategic in your research. So like, why am I looking in Ohio for a birth record in 1801 when they didn't start collecting them until 1875?
Or in Louisiana, I can find the birth and death. Why can't I find that marriage record? Well, it's never been kept at a state level.
Nope.
Still isn't. So you need to know that kind of background information. So that's a great resource that we'll make available to you.
Absolutely. So I think we should go through each vital record and what we can find in them. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. So let's start with birth records. What do you think you could find in a birth certificate?
Hopefully a birth.
A birth, the person's name at birth, right? their parents' names, right? The date, the place of birth.
The place of birth is real critical.
Especially because borders change. You might be born in one county, and then, by the time you're looking for it, that county's split into 3 counties. And that CDC resource that we talked about previously, that's important because it will tell you how to get these records. It'll tell you where to write in your state capital, what department to get these records from, how much they cost, because God knows they cost money. And I know there's a big controversy. Some states are much easier to obtain records from than others.
So what about death records? What can you find on a death record?
On a death record, you could find the deceased person's name, especially if they were a woman. You could find their maiden name, which is a great clue, their parents' names, their parents' place of birth. So it could say, the village, the town, the county, the state, or it could just say France or USA. But any little nugget is a clue, a place to start. It could say the deceased place of birth, right? And their place of death, if they died at home or in the hospital. It could give burial information, right? Where were they buried? That's a great clue. And it gives the name of the informant, who told the government that this person died. And that's an excellent clue, because if you know somebody well enough to be reporting their death, odds are that you're a relative.
That's a good point. One other piece you might find in any of these records is a middle initial or a middle name. That's a great clue. If your relative is John Smith, a middle initial or a middle name is a wonderful thing to have. So these vitals can also give you that kind of information.
Yeah, and burial information, I think, is critical. I've discovered many cemeteries that I didn't know, or I've discovered how many times have I walked through that cemetery and not seen this person, or just missed them.
You also might find cause of death.
Oh, absolutely, you'll find cause of death.
And that can give you a lot of good family stories in your research.
Sure can. I had one of my favorite death records that I found just last year, 2019. My uncle was a boat captain in Bayonne, New Jersey, and he was walking and he was hit by a train.
Oh my!
Yes.
Well, that's a good little piece of story about him.
So his death certificate that was always a family myth, but that death certificate confirmed that for me.
So these are very vital pieces of information for you to have.
Absolutely. Vital records are vital.
Absolutely.
They're essential and critical.
We also mentioned there's other records around, like draft registrations. In World War I, you had to register for the draft. You'll find the name, the birth date, their age, their citizenship, their race, nearest relative, which I find very interesting. But the one that I really like is description. It'll tell you their height, their build, the color of their eyes, and the color of their hair. Now, it just might be short, medium, tall, but it will tell you if they had blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes. And that's a nice piece of information to have. It'll also tell you their occupation at the time they registered, and their employer. So there's some real good pieces of information there if you're trying to research the history and you want to know more than just the birth, death. But you can get that information by starting with those vital records. Now, in World War II, what was really interesting is instead of the nearest relative, I love this piece, it asks for the name of the person who will always know your address.
Yes.
I think there might have been something politically going on there. I don't know that they couldn't ask for nearest relative, but they asked for the name of the person who will always know your address. Then they follow up with the question, and what is the relationship of that person?
Which is great to know the relationship, sister, mother, wife.
It's terrific to know that piece of information.
Great clue.
Passenger list and immigration records. Another great piece of
can I say something about draft cards before we get ahead?
Absolutely.
It's sentimental. It's not really a clue, but what I love about a draft card is the draftee has signed that card. And that may be the only time you ever see their signature. And it just gets me every time. When I have a new person and I see their handwriting.
That's an excellent point. Again, we've said this in our past sessions. These are the things that make them human. They make them real. That's an excellent point.
I had a lady cry at the library when I showed her grandfather's draft card and she saw his handwriting.
Oh, nice.
It's touching. It's why we do this, to feel the emotion. Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you about immigration.
That's an excellent point. Passenger lists, immigration records. I haven't been very lucky with immigration records, I have to say.
It's hard.
They're very hard. Everybody wants to jump there, but they're hard to find. But you can find a lot of passenger lists. And again, you can get the name, you can get a birth date or maybe age, depending on when and how they arrive, their gender, their arrival date, a really excellent piece of information.
The name of the ship.
The name of the ship. Where did they depart from? Where are they headed from? But one of the big finds is who are they traveling with? Go down that list, and all of a sudden, a whole world of who they're traveling with can open up to you. It could be children, spouses, could be brothers and sisters. Any number of people could show up on that list.
Who are they traveling to? Is somebody meeting them at the dock when they get off the boat? And the other thing I like to know is who paid the passage. My great-grandma was 14 years old and she paid her own passage. Wow. Did somebody give her that money? I'll probably never know, but I think that's fascinating.
That is fascinating.
And if they have an occupation, or are they a schoolgirl?
Excellent.
Or if she was a seamstress at 14. I can barely darn socks.
And to go with that, then there's immigration records. And immigration records generally are found in the country of origin, but in today's world, you can find a lot of those kinds of records online. And do some research for them. But immigration records are really interesting. In my case, it's my second great-grandmother. I found in the immigration record that she emigrated for religious reasons.
Oh.
And that led me to try to do a whole lot more research about her, where I came to find out that, in fact, she came over in 1843 when the Lutherans and the persecution was going on in Germany. Oh. So you can find little nuggets like that, and they will take you to other information. So immigration records is another good source.
Are totally essential. So many great clues in there. Another great resource are marriage records. So obviously the name of the groom, the name of the bride with her maiden name, and their address at the time of their marriage, which I love because then you can Google map it and see if they live near each other or where they lived in reference to each other.
Or did they go to church together?
Something like that. Like, did they live in the same neighborhood? Did they meet at the grocery store? You can use your imagination, obviously. But that's the fun part, don't you think?
I think that is the best part.
Yeah, yes. To try and figure out the lives that they led. Another piece of another important clue that you could find on a marriage record would be their parents' names, or the witnesses of their marriage who witnessed. You don't have just anybody be your marriage witness, so it would be an important person. Sometimes that's how you can verify a cousin or an important family member, and then obviously the date they got married.
Kind of important,
right? You've had some success with marriage records, no?
I have. But we also need to be aware that not all marriage records are found in the resources. We talked about it at the state or county level, etc. It might only be a church record.
Absolutely.
And in my case, my success was in a church record where it also said where the bride was from. And she came from a small town called Bierfelden, which is in Germany. But with a little help from Google Maps, I finally found it. So now I was able to get across the Great Pond. So little nuggets can be found almost anywhere.
Great clues. And don't be intimidated that some church records are going to be in Latin. Maria will be Mariam or something like that. Just
Google Translate is your friend.
Absolutely. So where can we find all these records, Lois?
Well, one good source is NARA, the National
Archive and Records Administration.
We always go by NARA, and I never can remember its full name.
NARA.
But that's a website that I highly recommend. It's not the easiest to navigate through, but they have some fantastic records. Many of what we've talked about, but particularly like the passenger ships,
absolutely
records of passenger lists. They've got many times they have pictures of occupations of family members. There's a lot of different kinds of records. So that's one place I would definitely recommend everybody go to.
pension files. If you're looking for a Civil War record of a relative or even a Revolutionary War record, that's the place to go.
That's a place to go. You might even find applications there.
Absolutely. Learn their website. It's worth it.
It's worth it. Mm-hmm. Where else should we look?
Well, I have to talk about the two big places to look for records, Ancestry and Family Search. What I think people should do when they're surfing Ancestry is that the top button, it says search, click on that drop down and see all collections. And then when you click on all collections, scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see that huge map. Click on your state and see the records that are specific to your state. Why would you drink from the fire hose when you just need a glass of water? Look for if you're looking for Connecticut records, that's the best way to find records that are exclusively to Connecticut. You can do something very similar on Family Search, where when you're on their main screen, it says research location, and you can just type in your location, France, New Jersey, Washington State. On the bottom underneath that, there's a box that says find a location, and that's where you could type in. They have a big map. You could just click on wherever part of the world you're interested in, whether it's Uruguay or Connecticut. And also keep in mind, you can always use Ancestry here at the library. The library edition is available to you.
And Family Search.
Family Search is free. That's one of the tenets of the Mormon Church. It's free to use. You just have to have an account, and I'm hoping soon that all the Family Search libraries in the area reopen, because you can get some really great documents. You might just see the index or see a citation, a transcription on your computer, but if you go to the Family Search library, you can see the actual original document. I had great luck with Louisiana birth certificates are a narrative. It said Louis Schuler, born in blah blah Germany, and his wife blah blah gave birth to a son, and it tells you, it's like written in a paragraph. It gives you their address, what he did for a living. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever found, and it was up in the Family Church, the Family History Library up in Newport Richey. So when they reopen, I highly suggest.
But they do have an online site, Family Search,
right,
which you can get a lot of records from. The library is good because there's also people to help you.
Right.
But your local library can help you too.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
So those are good points.
Yeah. So this December, this will be our last podcast of the year. I'm hoping that is something we can continue and do in January. But Lois, do you have any success, some great genealogical success that you had this year?
Well, for me, my success actually came early. I was doing a lot of research, and in my husband's family, and you'll probably run into this as well, that the names are the same because they name their children. Mm-hmm. So we've got William Willard, who had William Willard, and his brother John Willard had a son named William Willard. So sorting the Willards out was a big challenge, but for me, that was a major accomplishment. The same thing with another member of his family, the McFarlands. What I did with that for me was very exciting too. So not only accomplishment one, but accomplishment two was I went out and I mapped their path from when they came into the United States to where they ended up in Illinois. And over a period of years, from the 1750s to the 1830s, they lived in 4 or 5 places. And I watched their migration path and mapped it from Virginia to Tennessee to Kentucky to Ohio to eventually Illinois. My third accomplishment was to go visit all those places this year. Clearly that did not happen, so that has become a 2021 goal. But it is kind of fun. You can go out on maps and you can plot these and see the migration path. And that also becomes very interesting because you can compare the migrations of other members of a family. And you'll find some very interesting correlations as you go along. So for me, that was probably the biggie for 2020.
That is a great project. I love that idea. Now, were you able to go back and see, oh, well, this son was born here in Michigan or Kentucky, so those records will be there, and somebody else was born in Virginia, so those records will be there? That's a great way to really visualize a family.
In fact, in one example, I couldn't figure out why the family went from Virginia to Tennessee and then up to Ohio. Then I found out, I think a record is wrong.
Oh.
Because they were in Green City, Tennessee. I later find out they were in Green City, Ohio.
Oh.
And I believe the record was wrong because all the rest of the family never showed Tennessee. All the rest of the family just went to Green City, Ohio.
Wow.
So not only do you find
Yeah.
who was born where and marriages where, but when you map it out, you can say something doesn't seem quite right.
That's why being a transcriber or an indexer for genealogical records is so important, because one mistake and you're, altering somebody's research. You have to be super careful.
Absolutely. How about you for 2020?
I have two major accomplishments. It was a 20-year search for my great-great-grandmother's death record. I never knew what happened to her. She was born in 1867 in Orange County, New York. Lived all of her life in Rockland County, New York, and I could never find her in a death index or anything. And then, quite by mistake, and this was a great lesson for me to learn, to look outside the box, to think a little more broadly. I was looking for her daughter's obituary, and I found hers in the newspaper. And for years, I had seen in the New York Death Index a woman with her name, Josephine Rose, who died in Newburgh in 1957. And I thought, well, that couldn't be her. It's too late. She couldn't have lived that long. And Newburgh is way far from where she was born and lived. So why would she have died in Newburgh? It made no sense to me. Well, the first line of her obituary is that she died on this day at the home while she was visiting friends in Newburgh, New York.
Huh.
So, I could have had that 5 years sooner if I had been paying more attention.
Yeah, those are terrific things.
Absolutely. Live and learn, right?
Live and learn.
Yes. I have one more accomplishment I want to tell you all about. And I took a class, an e-course, and it helped me learn to write a research paper with citations. And it was a remarkable experience for me. I never will do any research now without a plan, without a log, and then being able to put my findings together. And it was called Research Like a Pro, and I highly recommend it to everyone. So Lois, what are your goals for genealogy for 2021? Do you have any resolutions?
Oh, for 2021, well, there's always several goals, short-term and long-term.
Mm-hmm.
My long-term goal is to determine where in Bayern, Germany, my second great-grandfather is from. I have never been able to get across the Great Pond.
Wow.
And I've been searching for him for many, many years. So that's a really long-term goal. Mm-hmm. Shorter-term goals, travel.
Yeah. Are you going to go to all the places you didn't get to go to in 2020?
Yes. Following up on that 2020 accomplishment where I mapped across the migration, we're going to go and try to follow that migration as soon as we can. How about you?
Well, I do want to go. I'm longing for a trip to New York to visit some cemeteries and make some connections.
Which sounds kind of silly to non-genealogy
Yes,
people.
But it's true. I'm dying. Like I would get out of that plane and go right to the cemetery from the airport. But we have a joint goal, which I'm excited to share with everybody.
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay, so through the magic of Ancestry DNA, Lois and I have discovered that we are 5th to 8th cousins. She matched my brother, she matched my sister, I matched her sister.
It was quite a surprise for both of us because obviously we're friends, we've been working together, and to find out we're related was pretty amazing. Yes. So now we have a goal.
To get that email Lois emailed me in the middle of the pandemic when the library was closed. It was hard to do research because I had trouble concentrating when everything first shut down. But to get that Lois email saying, "Are you this person on Ancestry DNA?" It thrilled me. So our goal for 2021 is to figure out how indeed we are related.
And we know when it's 5th to 8th cousins, if you're not familiar, that means it's way back in history. This isn't our grandparents.
No, it's definitely not.
3-4 generations, maybe 5 generations back before we're going to find them, which is why one of my goals is to find out where my 2 times great-grandfather is from. But that's our 2021 joint goal this year, is to find out how we're related.
So we're going to do it, and then we're going to come up with an in-person library program to explain it to everybody. That's my other goal.
So hopefully you will join us for that, because that'll be the fun for us for 2021.
Yes.
Might be near the end of 2021 before we actually find it.
But we're going to do it. We are. So thanks for joining me, cousin.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And thank you all for listening for our last 2020 broadcast.
Yes. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Have a safe and happy New Year. And hopefully 2021 is a vast improvement over 2020. And remember, you can email us or call us if you have any questions or comments about this broadcast. And be sure to look in the show notes below the podcast to see anything that we talked about today, whether it's the CDC list, NARA, or the Research Like a Pro program.